Breaking news crossed just as we were coming onto the air from the New York Times, reporting that really one of the key witnesses you could ever get, the number one person in the White House during the insurrection and the handover, Mark Meadows, has now testified before this special counsel grand jury, or now two of them, that we've been covering. Now, you've heard other big names here and out in the country. There are people who follow news closely and people who sort of keep up. And Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor turned America's kind of coup consigliere, might be at times more well-known, might sound like a bigger witness. But as far as Jack Smith is concerned, and based on the tea leaves we've been reading, Mark Meadows remains the key person at the center of both these probes. When we came on the air, I briefly quoted the New York Times making that point. We would second it. We've said it before when you look at how significant he is. So here's what the Times has. Meadows has testified. He's a key witness in both of those things. They note it's not precisely clear when he testified or if investigators even questioned him about one or both of the cases. And again, they move quietly. They may not be trying to let anybody know exactly what they talked about. We do know he was a Trump representative to the National Archives, and that he, as both that role and the top aide, meaning the top key staffer of the whole operation, was at times part of the team that was trying to discuss those matters with Donald Trump. And then there's this, and this is new as well. Mark Meadows' lawyer telling the New York Times that Meadows has maintained a commitment to tell the truth where he has a legal obligation to do so. Now, on the one hand, you look at a quote like that and you might say, all right, Ari, isn't that just like boilerplate? And the answer is no, not in MAGA land, not with a former president who demands that people basically attack everything as a witch hunt. The obligation to tell the truth, the signal he's sending to perhaps people in the probe, as well as certainly any prosecutor who might ever judge him, is, I'm on board cooperating. Then there's the coup plot. The Times reports that Meadows and this so-called band of loyalists were fighting to keep Trump in power, that he was the right-hand man to empower that group in the president's final chaotic weeks in office. Indeed, the Times says Meadows remained the key leader in that effort. Now, I want to be clear, there's no reporting that he's a subject or target of this probe. His lawyer seems to think it's a good time to remind everyone that he is, quote, cooperating, which certainly isn't going to make Donald Trump happy tonight. And this is all coming out on one of the busiest weeks we've ever seen in the special counsel probe. So to get into the Meadows of it all, we have former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti. Welcome back.
Good to be here, Ari.
Good to have you. Short of Mike Pence, who was more directly involved as a target of the coup plot, Meadows would seem to me one of the most, if not the other most important witness. What does it mean when you see brand new tonight that he has testified?
Oh, it's absolutely huge for a couple of reasons. One is, as you point out, he's in the center of everything, Ari. You know, a lot of us watched the January 6th committee hearings, and we were, full attention, right? Particularly Cassidy Hutchinson's testimony. And that was riveting testimony, but often she was saying, well, this person contacted Mark, or I was in the room when Mark was talking to so-and-so. Everything was through Mark. She was an assistant to Mark.
Yep.
Mark Meadows, that's the guy that we're hearing from here. I think that, he is at the center of everything because not only he was the White House chief of staff, who's traditionally a gatekeeper for the president, but Trump was not using text messages and emails. All of that was going through Meadows. And so really, any plot that there was on January 6th was going through Meadows at that time. He was going to be the one who was, hearing from people who are potentially in contact with those who were storming the Capitol. He's also the person who was dealing with the White House lawyers, right? Don McGahn was ultimately there in his office. And so, or excuse me, not Don McGahn, Pat Cipollone was there in his office.
Replacement at White House counsel, yeah.
Exactly, right. And so ultimately, I think he's so important. And of course, he's also the person who would be shepherdizing the transition out and documents potentially going to Mar-a-Lago. So aside from this tape we heard about, this recording recently, I think it's just really a central witness and a witness who has not always been cooperative. for example, with the January 6th committee.
Right, and it's a reminder of that contrast. McGahn, it's funny you mentioned, did cooperate extensively with Mueller, but tried to duck Congress. Meadows, we're seeing that same play. And in all fairness, imagine any member of Congress you don't like, imagine them running a committee, and imagine someone going to their lawyer and saying, what can we legally do to delay or forestall dealing with this member? I mean, that's a little different than the pressure, legally and otherwise, to deal with an open federal criminal probe or plead the fifth, as we know some tried to do. So walk us through how on the federal criminal probe, they both need to gather the facts, that's getting all the evidence, but also that they sometimes could use a grand jury to begin building their case, including rebutting defenses. So would they, for example, potentially ask Meadows, up and through January 20th, did you and Trump ever discuss a magical, secret, automatic declassification process?
Right. Were you ever in the room when Trump was waving his hands and saying he declassified anything? Had you ever heard of this? Absolutely. Locking Meadows out of being a witness for Trump is in many ways as important as any affirmative testimony he would give. And, you know, that sentence that you read a moment ago, Ari, is so important. You know, he's ultimately, you talked in the last segment about CYA. That's exactly what was happening here. Ultimately, at the end of the day, Meadows does not want to become a subject or a target of this investigation. And part of that is making sure that, you know, he's going to tell the truth. He's not necessarily going to be the one who buries Trump, but he's also not going to be the, you know, the one out there sticking his neck out lying for him on.
Finally, from legal experts, we heard a lot of intrigue about the recent indications that were nearer to the end than the beginning. Now we learn there's actually a whole new second grand jury. The kind of thing we've cautioned viewers before is what complicates analyzing a black box, a secret operation like these kind of probes, at least when they're run quietly. So given everything we know at this moment, do you still think we are close to concluding actions in this probe, or it might be longer?
I think we're close, but for me, close means 2-3 weeks. I disagree with my good friend Andrew Weissman, who was talking about maybe this week. I think here's a great example. I think that, you know, Jack Smith and his team are going to be trying to absorb the testimony of Mark Meadows and seeing whether that changes anything. They just met with Trump's attorneys. They're going to listen to the defense arguments. Not because that's going to change their mind, but because they might retool their case a little bit to deal with some of those defense arguments. So I think in the next few weeks, we're going to see something. And what we might see is 2 indictments, just like we saw in the Manafort case. We saw 1 indictment in Virginia, 1 indictment in D.C. I could definitely see the feds here bringing an indictment in D.C. for everything that they can. That's a more favorable venue for them. But then ultimately some crimes that they can't charge in D.C. because they didn't occur there, they ultimately bring in Florida on the second track.